Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Robyn. I'm your bonkle. Have you ever been in a relationship where you feel like you're forgetting a lot of stuff? You're supposed to take out the trash and you forgot, or you're supposed to remind your spouse to get up and you forgot, or you lost something important. Well, that's happened to me before, but never my husband. Gone Girl is a 2012 thriller written by Gillian Flynn. Story of a woman who goes missing on the morning of her 5-year anniversary. Her husband, Nick, is the prime suspect in the investigation of her disappearance. But when the investigation turns from kidnapping to possible murder, the town, his family, his friends start to turn on him. Everyone's looking to the police to find out who is responsible. The movie adaptation was released in 2014. It was directed by David Fincher. Gillian Flynn also wrote the screenplay. It stars Ben Affleck and Rosamund Pike. And it was scored by Trent Reznor. That's pretty cool. So, if you're afraid of spoilers, I recommend you go watch the movie now, or even better, go read the book if you have a good 3 days to go do that. Here is a trigger warning list for possible triggers. Thank you, future Robyn. The opening of the movie is the same as the book. Nick Dunn is looking at his wife and saying that he wishes he could crack open her pretty skull. He says, "What are you thinking? What have we done to each other? What will we do?" Nick Dunn it is the morning of his 5th anniversary with his wife. Nick and Amy live in North Carthage, Missouri, which is where Nick grew up. They had been living in New York before, but now they're living in North Carthage. Ben Affleck in this is really swole. I feel like this is right around the time that Batman came out. 2015. Okay, so maybe he was, at this time, maybe he was training to be in Batman, or the dude is just swole. He goes to the bar, aptly named, that he owns with his sister, Margot, or Go. She is his twin sister. The story is told in different segments. Nick's perspective in the present, and it is told in Amy's perspective through her diary. Amy's diary, she's writing with this really weird fluffy pen, like she's 12, and she's talking about how she met a boy. Nick and Amy meet at a party, and they have like some cute banter back and forth, and they make fun of the other guests. He asks her what she does for a living, and she gives him a little quiz. This is a fun element to the book that I really liked. She is someone who writes quizzes for magazines. She actually has a degree in psychology.
A, I'm an award-winning scrimshander. B, I'm a moderately influential warlord. C, I write personality quizzes for magazines.
This is also where I learned the word scrimshander, so that's going to be going into the mental Rolodex. They leave together, and Amy says that she finds that Nick to be not very trustworthy because he has a cleft chin. Is that the reason why they chose Ben Affleck? They just needed someone with a cleft chin? They have this cute thing where he covers his chin to basically tell her that she can trust him. And that comes back later. They go outside, and there's a bakery delivering a batch of powdered sugar, and there's sugar all over the air. And he dusts the sugar off her lips and kisses her so that he can taste her. This part was in the book, but I totally missed it. Whoops. Then they get together and they have some nice time. Quality people eat. Back to Nick Dunn on the day of. So they talk about how it's his 5th anniversary and how his wife, Amy, every year does a treasure hunt for him to find these clues so that he can find his way to the gift that she's gotten him. This year, it is the 5th anniversary, which is wood. And Margot makes a really weird joke.
Go home, brains out, slap her with your penis. There's some wood for you, bitch.
Are the straights okay? Nick gets a call from his neighbor, so he rushes home, and the front door is open and the cat is sitting there. So he goes inside and he sees that there is a sign of a struggle. The coffee table is broken, the ottoman's turned over, and he can't find his wife. In the book, it's mentioned that the cat is too dumb to run away, so it's not a big deal that it's just sitting out front. He calls the police, and Officer Gilpin and Detective Boney show up. So they're walking around the house asking questions, and here's where I noticed that it feels like they're taking the Nick character in a different direction.
Used to live in New York.
City?
Yeah, I was a writer. We're both writers.
He says conversationally that he used to be a writer. You know, he says things very nonchalantly, but in the book, he says it because he just wants to be recognized. He wants people to like him. He wants people to think that he's more than just living in this small town in Missouri, where he's from. But in the movie, it's a lot more like he just seems like a laid back guy. He mentions how he owns the bar, and they say that they like the name of it. It's very meta. Again, in the book, he wanted people to not get it. He wanted to feel superior, and that's why he named it that. I don't get that impression here. So it turns out that Amy is the star of a book series called Amazing Amy. It is a very popular kids book series written by her parents. It's back to Amy's diary. They're going to a launch party for her parents' book. Oh my god, look at this wiggy wig. Look at this wiggy wig.
I quit cello. In the next book, Amazing Amy became a prodigy. I got cut freshman year. She made varsity. She got the dog. Puddles made her more relatable.
In the Amazing Amy books, the child is always one step ahead of real Amy. And so now, Amazing Amy is getting married. In the Gone Girl book, they mention that Amazing Amy is marrying Abel Andy, which is yet another example of a really high quality woman marrying a nothing man. Have Nick there with her. And I think that that is probably because they don't want to use clunky exposition. They want her to explain to him what is going on. So like I don't take an issue with that choice. Amy goes off and starts talking to the reporters, and this is a really weird, clunky, robotic scene. They're asking questions in a way that humans don't really talk.
Curious whether it's difficult for you to see Amazing Amy heading down the aisle.
And this big party celebrating this fictional wedding?
Because it's my understanding you are not married.
Is that correct?
I'm wondering if it's supposed to be because each of them talk, but it doesn't really matter what any of them say because they all have the same things to ask her about. You are not married. You are the inspiration for the Amazing Amy book. You know, like, I don't know if that was on purpose, but it was a very weird choice. Amy says that the book Amy has always been ahead of her, and I don't think that Amy in Gone Girl, the book, would have admitted that. Nick proposes in a very cute way.
My colleagues tell me that you are not yet married. Is that correct?
I'm not.
Isn't it time we fix that?
In the book, we actually don't know how he proposes, but this seems like it tracks. You know, it's sweet, it's romantic, and it shuts up all the reporters. Back to Nick, the night of. He is at the police station, he's getting fingerprinted, and they're asking him questions, you know, to rule him out. At this point, in the book, I'm not sure whether they say it in the movie, but in the book, Nick is hyper aware of the fact that it's always the husband. He says that he feels like he's on an episode of Law and Order and then starts singing awkwardly. That I believe that Nick in the book would have done that. He's a very awkward person who constantly puts his foot in his mouth. They ask what he does for a living. So he says that he both owns the bar and he teaches at the college. He teaches creative writing. I don't understand what the point of changing him to a creative writing teacher versus a journalism teacher. There's this whole part in the book where he talks about how he doesn't want to tell the students that he was laid off because print media is dying. He wants to tell the journalism students not to get their hopes up, that, you know, it's a really hard world out there. He got laid off and his wife got laid off. You know, both of them worked for magazines, but they are so in awe of him. They ask so many questions about what he used to do, and he is so intoxicated by it that he can't bring himself to tell them. There are so many things in the book that are left to the wayside, and I think that this doesn't make sense to me. They could have just kept him as a journalism teacher. Like, the whole point of his character is that he is vaguely pathetic, and Nick in the movie is not pathetic. You know, he's just a regular dude. So they ask Nick what his wife does all day, and he says that he doesn't really know, but she reads a lot of books. That is going to come back. They ask Nick if Amy has had any problems with drugs, because a lot of bored housewives get into that kind of thing. He says he doesn't think so. In the book, when they're asking him questions like what he was doing the morning of, what he was planning on getting her for their anniversary, which, by the way, he didn't get her anything. He had no plans. He didn't make any reservations. He tells them in the book that he made reservations at her favorite restaurant and didn't. They ask him if he knows her blood type. He says no. Detective Boney asks him whether he's called Amy's parents, and he says no. And she's like, oh my God, go call them now. He's been putting it off because calling them means that it's real. There's a little bit more about it in the book. Like, they ask him over and over and over and over again until they call at like 2 o'clock in the morning, or like really late at night, and they're like, we were playing tennis, we could have been there with you. So he hears some talking in the other room, and he sees his father. His father is, I don't know if it's mentioned in the movie, but he has Alzheimer's, and he has escaped from his assisted living facility, and apparently they've been calling him all day, but his phone has been off. In the book, someone from the assisted living place, a woman, calls him, and he's really rude to her, and he just hangs up the phone. But here you do see him, like, he does have, at least the movie version of Nick has a little bit of confrontations with different female characters, but I don't think that it's as much as it could be. Also, the dad in the book is this abusive, rude, mean asshole. And in the movie, he's just kind of like a feeble, sad, old man who you only see for like 30 seconds. He drives his dad home and we never see him again. On the drive, he grabs a cell phone, makes a phone call, but the person doesn't answer. Back to Amy's diary. Amy and Nick are in a bookstore. It is their second wedding anniversary. They have sex in the bookstore as though it's not part of the rest of the store and isn't in a big open place. They're somehow able to turn off the lights and close themselves off. I don't know if they're in the back room. I don't know what. They exchange gifts and they get each other the same set of cotton sheets. Aww, cute. In the present, the cops are at Nick and Amy's house. A woman named Noelle Hawthorne shows up. She is a pregnant woman who lives a couple of houses down. She claims to be Amy's best friend, and Bodhi says she's going to come by and ask her some questions. We find out here that A, there is blood splatter in the kitchen. B, all of the bills are in Amy's name. The house is in her name. My nails look like crap. They look fine. They're not as nice as I would have liked, but that is what it is. Oh, God. This is what happens when I do things so, like, quickly, hastily. It's okay. So it turns out that the house is rented, but it's rented in her name. All the utilities are in her name. His bar is in her name. And then in her underwear drawer, they find an envelope written Clue 1. The next day, Nick drives to the police station with Go. The in-laws are there, Rand and Mary Beth. Rand is very huggy, Mary Beth less so. They have a press conference, and Nick goes in front of the cameras and he says, "My wife, Amy, is missing. If you have any information, please call us. Thank you." And then Rand and Mary Beth come up and they're like, "Our wonderful, amazing Amy is missing. We love her so much." They're talking about how much they love her and who she is as a person. And you can just see Nick kind of like looking side to side to be like, oh shit, I should have done that. And then they're like, we have a hotline, we have a headquarters for a search for Amy, there's a website. They take Nick's photo in front of her missing poster and he smiles at the last minute, and that's gonna come back. So in the police station, Rand and Mary Beth are talking about the people who circulate around Amy who are interested in her fame, in her as a person. She's a very magnetic person. And they mention someone that she used to date, Desi, who is played by Neil Patrick Harris. He was her high school sweetheart. When she broke up with him, he tried to kill himself. Desi had moved to St. Louis, which is actually really close to where they were living, but he had moved there before they had moved to North Carthage, and Nick points this out and also says that he's from St. Louis. I don't know why he is defending Desi. In the book, he is instantly suspicious of Desi, and also a man named Tommy O'Hara, who she had to go to the police about. They don't say what for.
What was the charge? Sexual assault, threat, battery, what?
I only know it was bad.
I didn't know this.
So Boney asks Nick about the envelope that says Clue 1, and he explains that it is part of a treasure hunt that Amy does for him every year. The clue takes him to his office, and he gets really excited that he knows it. It is mentioned a little bit in the movie that he isn't very good at the clues, but in the book it is really clear that he is really, really bad at figuring out these clues. His best year was the first year and he only figured out 2 out of 7. So it's mentioned in the book. He says to the detectives, "Wow, she must have gone easy on me this year." In his office at the school, they find the envelope for clue number 2, and Boney finds a pair of red lacy panties. He says that it's because he and his wife, sometimes do a little canoodling in the office. So in Clue 2, it talks about going to a little brown house, and he says he doesn't know what it is. The next scene, he is going to his father's house. He goes into the house and tries to put in the code, and the alarm goes off. They call him. He is able to find the envelope for clue number 3. He gives them the secret phrase, and Boney and Gilpin come in because they had been following him. But he lies and says that it's not the little brown house, and he points out that, in fact, the house is blue. In the book, book, when he goes to the house and he tries to put in the code, it doesn't work. And he mentions that Amy had always criticized that he put in his birthday. Also, when the alarm goes off, he is supposed to get a phone call immediately and doesn't. So the alarm just keeps going off and going off and going off, and eventually he gets a phone call and they ask him what Amy's childhood pet was, and he doesn't know. So he starts screaming at the notably female worker, and eventually he calls back, gets someone else, and gets them to turn off the alarm and cancel the call to the cops. Clue number 3 mentions that she's been very, very bad and she needs to be punished. She needs to be had. You need to go to where you hide goodies for anniversary number 5. He doesn't know what that means. In Amy's diary, they talk about how they are in a recession and how they are both about to lose their jobs. Nick is really bummed out because he's afraid that he's going to lose his job. He's afraid about money, and she says that they'll be fine. Amy tells Nick that she never wants to have the kind of relationship where she treats him like a dancing monkey. He says that he doesn't want the kind of relationship where he treats her like highway patrol. This is something that is in the book. She tries her best to let Nick do what he wants to do, even though she is a little bit disappointed, but she tells herself that it is best for the relationship that they don't treat each other this way. Then she breaks the news that Rand and Mary Beth are in deep debt. They have been dropped by the publisher, which in fact is because the book where Amazing Amy gets married really didn't sell very well, which is understandable because it's like, you know, who wants to read a book about the most amazing woman in the world marrying some nobody? Which I'm pretty sure is supposed to be thematic. But she needs to give them almost $1 million, which basically is going to wipe out almost the entirety of her trust fund. And he's worried about that, but they say that they'll figure it out. There's a time lapse. Amy comes home and sees that Nick is playing a new video game. He has bought a laptop for laptopping. She looks annoyed, but doesn't say anything. There's a bunch of takeout all over the place he hasn't cleaned. He gets upset because he can tell that she's annoyed. That really pisses me off. This happens in the book too, and it grinds my gears when people get upset for someone else restraining their reactions to an emotion that they are clearly having, because you cannot control when you have a feeling, but you can control your actions. And she is keeping her opinion to herself. I mean, is she going to bring it up to him later? Probably not. But if she was, he is going on the attack simply because she is having a feeling about something. And I think that's fucking bullshit.
My judgment? You certainly don't trust my intention.
What are you talking about?
Well, that's the basic tenet of a prenup, isn't it?
Why are you throwing that in my face again?
If someone is upset, you can talk to them. You can say, hey, it seems as though something I did upset you. Am I correct in this? Do you want to talk about it? As opposed to, well, I guess you're upset now. Where the am I supposed to go from there? Because you are doing a shitty thing. You are spending my money. You are playing video games instead of looking for a job. And you are mad at me because I came in and said, oh, like, you. Right off. He does apologize, but I don't think that Nick from the book would have. And then he gets a call from Go. I have a tattoo that I got about a year ago, and it still gets itchy. This happened with one of my other tattoos. It just, like, for a long time, it takes a while to heal, or it's just a little bit more sensitive, and it's bumming me out. You want to see it? Ta-da! Oh, it's upside down. I'll try to change it. Future Robyn, put this upside down. Ta-da! If anyone wants the information for my artist, she is in Montreal. I will link her below if you are interested. Boop, boop. Back to the present. It's been 2 days since Amy's been gone. Nick shows up at the headquarters. He greets people, but everyone's kind of giving him suspicious looks, including the police.
Good guy. So everybody can see him being a good guy.
Well, you really don't like him, do you?
What's to like?
Boney takes this opportunity to ask Nick about Noelle. Noelle is the pregnant woman who showed up the other day, and he says that she is a neighbor, but Amy and she were not very close. Neil Patrick Harris shows up, and he is Desi from high school, but Nick doesn't recognize him. I don't even know if he saw the photo with him in it, but anyway. Boney seems to be on Nick's side at this point, even though she seems a little suspicious of him. This is where he meets Shauna Kelly. In the book, Shauna Kelly is on Nick a lot. She is what Boney calls a true crime groupie. I totally believe that these people exist. She goes up to Nick and is like, oh my goodness, you should be eating. You know, she takes a selfie with him. him. In the book, she takes a selfie with him when they're actually in the woods looking for Amy. He's not allowed to go in because they're afraid he's going to tamper with the crime scene, which is fair. He's kind of greeting people on the way in, and that's when they take the selfie. Doesn't quite matter. He smiles because that's what you do when you're taking a selfie. In this version, he immediately realizes it's a mistake and asks her to give him the photo or to delete the photo, and she says no, and he kind of grabs for her phone and she freaks out and runs away. In the book, he eventually tells her to kind of leave him alone because it's not appropriate. People are looking at them because she keeps coming up to him and talking to him in front of everybody, and he doesn't like the optics of that. So eventually he's like, listen, like, I need you to leave, and she gets pissed off. Nick comes back in the room and Go tells him that Mary Beth is angry because she saw him talking to Shauna Kelly. He goes up to find Mary Beth, explains to her that his mom taught him to be nice. She taught him to be polite. And this could be true. I mean, again, this is more of a exposition situation because in the book, Mary Beth and Rand were on his side the whole time. They didn't get upset with him. They were like, this is a weird situation. We understand how you're going to react. But again, for exposition's sake, he is explaining why he smiled when the press came to take his photos. He's explaining why he's talking to these people because he was raised to be polite. Sure. But in the book, it's more, again, because he just can't bear to have people not like him. Back at the house, Boney is asking the officers whether they found any expensive golf clubs or any consoles, large TVs, and they say no. Noreen tries to come in again. She's banging on the door to talk to Boney, and they escort her out. It is an active crime scene, lady. Please, okay. Back to Amy's diary. They decide to move back to Missouri because Nick's mom is very sick. She's dying. And Amy talks about how she would have gone regardless, but she had wished he'd asked her. And that's also true to the book. And when they get there, she feels disposable. She feels like she doesn't belong. She feels like he doesn't even really want her there. The present, Nick is at Go's house and he gets a text message that says, I'm outside. And in comes his 21-year-old student and lover. Apparently he's been calling her and he asks why she hasn't been answering, and she says that she's in a play. She's in Godspell, which again, she is a theater student, not a journalism student, which I do not understand. Like, is it because someone is trying to say something about theater students? Are we supposed to be more loose? I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, but no comment. I don't know if it's supposed to be like, oh, she's a ditzy theater student versus a wide-eyed journalist who just looks up to him, right? Like, I feel like they're doing it in a way where we're supposed to like Nick more. To feed into that ditziness, he asks her whether she left panties in his office, and she's like, I don't know. Okay, whatever. He told Andy that he is going to leave Amy, that he does not want to be with her. Whoop. Oh, tits. Oh, okay. Back to Amy's diary, it is revealed that Nick is using her for sex. It is a little more explicit in the book, but basically they are having non-enthusiastic sex, which is basically SA. Enthusiastic consent or no consent, okay? So Nick's mom has died, and that's when Amy uses her trust fund to buy him the bar. So this is where Amy says that she really wants to go with Nick to wherever he's going. You know, in the book, it's kind of mentioned that he's actually happy. He's having a good time. He's going out and like hanging out with his friends and stuff like that. And she just feels like he's left her behind. So we see that a little bit here where she says that she wants to come with him. And he says, no, you wouldn't have a lot of fun. And this is where she floats the idea of having a baby. And he says that he doesn't want to be one of those couples who has a baby to save their marriage.
Save? Reboot, retool, rekindle, whatever.
This is where he shoves her. She falls against the banister and says that she wasn't afraid that he shoved her. She was afraid because she knew that he wanted to do it again. This is the same phrasing as in the book. Boney and Gilpin go into the abandoned mall where there are a lot of unhoused people. The mall has closed down, as is revealed in the book. So there are a lot of people who lost their jobs who are hanging out there. There are a lot of drug users, drug dealers. They go up to a particular drug dealer and they ask him whether they've seen this woman. They show her photo and he says, yeah, she tried to buy a gun, but I didn't have any. In the book, this is actually a group of people, like vigilante types, friends of Nick's, who say that they want to go, they have already gone to the mall and they wanted to talk to people, like to see if any of them had taken her, you know, because there have been some people in the area who have been assaulting women, and so they wanted to go and ask them about that. So he goes and his friends go, and Rand, Amy's father, goes with them, and they are the ones who find this drug dealer, and they encourage the drug dealer to then go and talk to the police. Back to Amy's diary, and she says that she tried tried to buy herself a gun for Valentine's Day. She says that she knows that Nick wants her out of the picture, and she said that she would sleep better with a gun. Back to Nick. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, and Nick and Andy have fallen asleep, and so he squirrels her out of the house. So Andy says that she wants him to call her every day or she'll go crazy. He says some very inspiring words.
Don't go crazy.
Okay.
And as she leaves, Go finally has a reaction that is not weird.
You fucking idiot. You fucking asshole. You fucking lied to my fucking face.
In the movie, it's revealed that she is in her early 20s, but in the book, she is 21, and they've been having an affair for a year. So she was like brand spanking 20 when they first started sleeping together, and he's like in his mid-30s, and he's her teacher. Fucking gross. She says, do you know how people are looking at you right now? She turns on the TV, and there's this like Nancy Grace type person talking about him. Her name is Ellen Abbott. How it's very suspicious, and how he's smiling in all these photos. They show the photo of him in front of the poster. They show the selfie. So in the book, they have Shauna Kelly on talking about how he's not acting appropriately, how he flirted with her because she's mad that he ignored her advances. This is where we meet Tanner Bolt. I actually really like the movie version of Tanner Bolt. I like him a lot better than the book version. He acts in a way that is a little bit more entertaining, but also he kind of serves as like a mouthpiece for the audience. So, and it's also played by Tyler Perry, which is great. I think he did an incredible job. I really enjoyed it. So he is a high-powered lawyer who basically reps guilty people. He's fun. He's really fun. And then Nick says something that's a little too on the nose. He says, I'm so tired of being picked apart by women, which he totally would have said in the book, but he wouldn't have said it out loud, I don't think. He would have said it in his head. So Nick, all the way through this point, has not hired a lawyer. In the book, he says, because, guilty people don't hire lawyers. I don't know who I'm talking to here. This is not true, okay? If the cops want to talk to you, get a lawyer, period. Lawyers actually protect your rights. Do not talk to a cop. Know your rights. You also don't need to let a cop into your house if they don't have a warrant. He naively thinks that because he's not guilty, he doesn't need a lawyer. Back at the station, Gilpin and Boney are talking about how there is no indication that Amy was taking any drugs. Forensics came in and they found a large pool of blood that had been hastily wiped up in the kitchen, and the blood type was type B, which is Amy's blood type. They're holding a candlelight vigil for Amy, and Nick comes up and basically says, please like me. I'm doing all these things. Look at what a good husband I am. And then he talks about how much he loves his wife and how he hopes to find her, and he looks into the crowd, and Andy is like, and then Noelle shows up and says, where's your wife, Nick? Did you know that she was 6 weeks pregnant? And the crowd completely turns on him. The cops bring him to his house. When they're back at his house, Boney asks him, did you know that she was pregnant? And he's like, I do not think that she is pregnant. She did not want to be pregnant. He says that Noreen is crazy and they weren't even friends. Boney pulls out a bunch of photos and they have taken photos at different places together. And she says, well, it looks like they're pretty close to me. She tells him about the blood. She tells him about how the struggle in the living room looks staged. And he's like, well, I don't understand. Why would you mop up the blood and then stage the struggle? And she says, well, if there's a struggle, we think of kidnapping, we look outside the house. If there's blood, we think it's murder, and we look inside the house. She also calls him Nick way too often. I do remember in the book this happening and it being incredibly annoying. I think it's on purpose. That's what we're doing here, Nick. So how was your marriage, Nick? We've had a look at your credit card statements, Nick. I don't know about the rest of you, but I used to work for customer service, and they always tell you that they want you to use the person's name more than once. It makes me super uncomfortable when people do this. I don't know who is comforted by this, but I find it really creepy. How you doing today, Robyn? Do you enjoy your current service provider, Robyn? How would you like your remains displayed, Robyn? So Boney reveals that they know that he is $100,000 in debt, and she shows the credit card statements, and he's like, these are not mine. I have never bought any of this stuff. I've never gone golfing before. Gilpin says, I like the robot dog. It is revealed that in April, he bumped up Amy's life insurance to $1.2 million. And he's like, she told me to do that. Finally, they get a phone call. It is confirmed that Amy was pregnant. And he throws a glass and the glass shatters. So in the book, this does happen, but he has the common sense to do it when nobody else is around. Then this is when he finally has the common sense to say that he wants a lawyer. Margot comes in and hears him talking on the phone to Amy's parents. And he says that he didn't know that she was pregnant. Amy didn't even want kids. When the phone call is done, Margot says, you told me that you didn't want kids. And he's like, I just wanted to put a good face on it. And Margot's like, I don't know what to think. He says that he told Margot that he didn't want kids because he didn't want Margot to hate her. He pulls out a box and shows her that he went to a fertility clinic, but that Amy just never used the sample and that they sent him a letter saying that they were going to destroy it. He gave it to Amy and she threw it away. Also is a letter from Desi that he had taken because Desi kept writing Amy letters, and also the prenup. And she says that this looks like you hate her. And he's like, well, maybe I do. Part about the fertility clinic was a part in the book that I remember particularly. Like he was afraid to ask Amy to have kids. So he had kind of been like dancing around the subject until finally he was like, let's try for a baby. So they started trying, it wasn't working. And so they went to the clinic. He gave his sample and then she never ended up doing her part. And one point he was just like, are you going to try? Are we going to try to have a baby? And she said, no. And that was the end of it. So at this point, Margot's like, listen, I need you to tell me the truth. And he says, are you asking me if I killed my wife? And she goes,
I would never ask you that.
Here is where everything kind of comes to a climax. Boney and Gilpin are looking around the father's house because they have a hunch that there's something there. They don't know if Amy is dead, but if she is, they need to find a body. The sound cue at this part is f***ing fire. Like this, when I was listening to this part, it really made sense that Trent Reznor had worked on the music for this. At the same time that Boney and Gilpin are looking around the dad's house, Nick is trying to figure out what the clue means. Eventually he figures out that the 5-year anniversary gift is wood. So he remembers that Margot has a woodshed. The house that Margot is living in, it's not revealed in the movie, but in the book, she's living in the mom's old house. And also, take someone to the woodshed means to punish them. I did not know that. Again, mental Rolodex. Thank you very much, Gillian Flynn. And so he goes there, and as he is heading to the woodshed, Boney and Gilpin are looking into the pilot light of the furnace. As this is happening, we hear Amy through her diary talking about how she is afraid that her husband's going to kill her. And we watch her go into the guest room, lock the door, and crawl under the covers. This is going to come back later. As they find Amy's diary that looks like someone had tried to set it on fire, Nick opens the woodshed and finds the 5-year gift and all of the items that he supposedly bought on the credit card. I do remember really enjoying this part. They did a really good job in the movie to emulate the tension at this part of the book. This is the twist of the story. Amy faked her death. So we cut to Amy the day that she left. This is when you kind of realize why they chose Rosamund Pike for this part, because she's not exactly like the ditzy, warm character that we get in the diary, which, by the way, is completely fabricated. It is explained in the book that she specifically wrote Amy in the diary to be naive, completely and utterly in love with Nick, and like a hopeless romantic, but that's not really who she is. And so I feel like we would have gotten a little bit more of that if we had had a different actor. Again, Rosamund Pike is amazing. I just feel like her depiction of Amy in the first half was a little bit less, it was a little bit less of a stark contrast. As she's driving, she's throwing all these pens out the window. She had been using different pens and different pencils while she was writing this fake diary to make it look like she had been doing over the course of several years. It's revealed that all the books that she was reading were all true crime books, and she wasn't reading them because they were fun. She was looking for tips. So the tonal shift is a lot less stark than it is in the book, but basically she shows herself to be judgmental. She talks about how she's going to befriend a local idiot, Noelle. She racked up credit card debt in Nick's name. She bumped up her own life insurance. She bought a generic car in cash. Again, in the book, it is explained also how she has all this cash. She takes $200 out of her account every couple of weeks so that it doesn't look like she has taken a whole bunch out and fled. In the book, Nick, a couple of chapters before it turns out that Amy has faked her own death, Nick asks Boney and Gilpin, like, is it possible that she faked her own death, right? Like when they're talking about the blood. Boney's like, well, it's not very likely because usually we see big cash withdrawals, or she would have used her credit cards. But she was smart enough to have, she planned this for a year. So she was able to very slowly do these things. She also bought the car several months ago so that nobody would see her on the news and be like, oh my gosh, I know her. She also took the supposed murder weapon and put it in his fireplace and set a fire because that's suspicious because it's July. Also in the book, there is a fun part where she is supposed to go with Nick's mom to give plasma because Nick's mom used to go give plasma all the time, but she couldn't anymore because she was doing chemo. But she asked Amy to come with her to be a proxy, and Amy was like, I'm terrified of needles, I'm terrified of blood, and actually fainted. So when she comes home and Nick is like, hey, you fainted? And she's like, yeah, I'm afraid of needles. I've always been afraid of needles. And because Nick never really remembers stuff, he just chalked it up to, oh, this must be another thing that I had forgotten. So when they say, oh, there's a bunch of her blood on the floor, he thought to himself, okay, well, she couldn't have done that because she's terrified of blood, which is not true. So like super fun. It's revealed that she thinks that people care a lot about pregnant women. So she talks about how she faked her pregnancy. She drained the toilet and had Noelle come over, use it, and then stole her pee. In the book, she talks to the doctor and says, listen, I'm terrified of needles, but can I do a urine test? And so she uses Noelle's urine, and she steals a syringe to take her blood out and to be able to pour it on the floor. In the book, she had been planning on shooting herself, but when she couldn't get a gun, she ended up just using a knife. She pours her own blood on the floor. She mops it up really badly as though Nick had cleaned it, and she stages the living room. But it looks staged on purpose. And while she's doing this, she says, clean and bleed, bleed and clean. This is a reference to the book. When she is hiding out, she's watching TV, and during daytime TV, the only commercials she sees are for cleaning products and sanitary napkins. And she says, well, they must think that this is what women do all day. They just bleed and clean and bleed. So that's a fun ad. She talks about how her old diary entries are true. So like when they met and like the kissing with the sugar and how things had been really good for a certain point. And then the rest of it you start to embellish. She reveals that Nick never actually assaulted her and how she was just using it to incriminate him. So she says that the end of her plan was in a couple months she was going to go on a cruise, fill her pockets with rocks, and throw herself into the river so that when her body showed up, that they would think that Nick had killed her. So Amy gets to a rest stop, she cuts and colors her hair, or rather she puts on an even shittier looking wig. This haircut thing comes back later in the book, but not in the movie. So she talks about how she wanted to be a cool girl, how every man wants a cool girl. And a cool girl can look different depending on what the man wants, you know? They can be an otaku, they can be like a girl who drinks beer, they can be someone who really likes reading Proust. Like as long as the girl basically likes what he likes and sucks his So that's what she had tried to be for Nick, but he stopped trying, so did she. It just occurred to me that Amy talks about how she wanted to be the cool girl, but she's not the cool girl, and now she's the gone girl. I'll see myself out. And she says that he actually expected her to love him unconditionally, and then found himself a newer, younger, bouncier, cool girl. Okay, and then you see her eating a cheeseburger. This part is so weird. In the book, in the last couple of months before she was planning on leaving, she had put on 15 pounds. She had gained weight, and she made sure that no one took her photo so that when she did go missing, people would show her photo when she was thinner and it would be easier for her to not be recognized. But they just kind of watch her eating snacks and they put like a pillow down her shirt and put cotton balls in her mouth to make her look fatter. It's so stupid. It's so dumb. Okay, so she rents a cabin in the Ozarks and she takes a hammer and hits herself in the face. I don't understand why she did that. Like, she wasn't planning on anyone seeing her. I don't understand why she did that. It doesn't make any sense. But back to Nick. A couple days gone. He has found the shed. He brings Margot there, and Margot is immediately like, oh my God, that bitch. Like, apparently, without explaining to her, she knows exactly what happened. In the book, she comes to the shed and she looks at Nick like she has just discovered that he killed Amy. And that part kind of ruins their relationship. Like, there's always this moment where he's going to know that she thought he killed someone, and she's going to know that she believed he killed someone. Not in the movie. Okay, they open the gift and it is a pair of marionettes called Punch and Judy dolls. So I didn't know this, but Punch and Judy are actually real puppets. It's a real story where Punch kills his wife and their baby. Yikes. The note inside says that he's going to take a trip up the river, and that is where the prison is. That's pretty funny. He reveals to Margot that same morning where she went missing, he was going to ask for a divorce, but she told him to go hang out at the beach so that he could reevaluate their relationship. And because she knew that he was going to be alone, it gave him no alibi. In the book, he goes to Andy's place, sleeps with her, and then goes and hangs out in one of the other abandoned houses where he reads his old magazine because, again, he's pathetic. This is, I guess, cleaner. They notice that the marionette, the wife marionette, is missing her handle. And Go asks, does Missouri have the death penalty? Spoiler alert, it does. Back to Amy. She has a tight schedule, including himself. So as she's hanging out in the cabin, there's another person staying there called Greta. She reaches out to Amy and, tries to be friendly, and Amy kind of brushes her off.
I'm Greta. I'm Nancy.
She goes to the library and watches the Ellen Abbott episode about Nick. She sees that everyone's dragging him online, and she's very happy about this. Greta asks Amy where she's from. She calls her Nancy. Amy says that she is from New Orleans. Greta has a split lip, and she says that it looks like they have the same taste in men. In the book, Amy is actually the one who reaches out to Greta because she's lonely and because she likes Greta and she wants to try to become like her. And so Amy tells the story about how she saw Nick and Andy and how he brushed the snow off her lips the same way he did with her. And Greta says that's the most disgusting thing she's ever heard.
Thank you.
In the book, they do kiss in the snow. They do go upstairs and sleep together, but I don't remember the dusting thing. But then again, I didn't remember the sugar thing, so I don't know. We see Nick get on a plane. I don't know why we need to watch him get on a plane. It seems like in a movie where there's a lot of stuff happening, we don't need to see him at the airport twice. But anyway, he goes to New York. He meets with Tanner Bolt. In the book, he had called ahead and Tanner told him to come meet him. But in this, he took a plane just to go to New York to try to flag down this famous lawyer in the lobby. Also in the book, he goes and he gets Tanner Bolt before he finds the stuff in the woodshed. So when he does find the stuff, Tanner comes over and is like, do not touch anything. Here, he tells him everything. He lays everything out. He says that his wife is trying to frame him. Tanner finds this hilarious and says that he's going to rep him. In the book, he's also very skeptical of the story, but I guess he needs to be the comic relief and we need the story to keep going. So here we go. He mentions that his retainer is $100,000, but says he's going to give him a "my wife is setting me up" discount, which if you're a lawyer, that's not a thing. Again, it's not a thing in the book. In fact, when the situation gets more and more complicated in the book, he gets more and more pissed off and annoyed. And you can tell that he wishes that he hadn't taken the case. He says that they need to start changing the public perception of Amy, which again makes no sense. If you start bad-mouthing a pregnant woman who has gone missing, that's a really bad PR move, guys. In the book, again, they say that they need to get Nick to get more sympathy, not we're going to drag your missing wife online, but okay. So in the book, Tanner tells Nick about O'Hara, but here, he just kind of knows about him. So he meets O'Hara. O'Hara's the guy that had been dating Amy before Nick and she got together. And he says how he was dating her, but she was a little bit too intense. So he started to back off. And she showed up at his house one day and they had consensual sex. And then the next day, the cops were at his house. They had found ties that she had tied to the headboard to make it look like he had tied her up, and she had done something to herself to make it look like she had been. And he pled down to sexual assault. So now he is on a sex offenders list. Back to Amy. She is watching Ellen Abbott. Noelle now is on the show, as in the book, and Greta calls her a rich bitch. I remember this part in the book because I laughed out loud. When Greta leaves to go to the bathroom, Amy spits in her Mountain Dew. In the book, she was at Greta's place, and so she went into Greta's fridge and spit in her milk and her orange juice and all of her different liquids. It's very funny. Okay, so Nick is at the airport and he tells Go how much it's going to cost, and she says she has a bunch of money saved and she will put a mortgage on the house. They'll figure out a way to pay Tanner Bolt. So as he's watching, again, this is national news, so he's watching at the airport, and they say that Nick and his sister are very close, kind of insinuating that they are incestuous. They also mention how Nick has never visited his father in the assisted living institution. In the book, the father keeps showing up at Nick's house over and over and over, and Nick has to keep bringing him back to the home. And it turns out that the reason why he's doing that is because Amy had been whispering in his ear over the course of the last year saying, "I love you, come live with us. I love you, come live with us," hoping that it would stick, and it did. Amy makes a call from her room to leave a tip with the cops saying that someone suspicious is hanging out in Margot Dunn's backyard. In the book, I don't think she did this from her room. I think that's a really dumb move. And like, Amy is so meticulous. In the book, she had also reported to the cops about the diary because they hadn't found it yet. Amy also removes the self sticky note off the calendar. So Nick visits Desi. Instead of being like, oh, hey, like, I want to talk to you, you know, he's like really confrontational, which is weird because he's supposed to be there to figure out if Desi has any stories about Amy from the past.
Did you treat her bad? Did you cheat on her?
That's a rude question.
Let me tell you what Amy told me. She dumped you. You completely unraveled. You stalked her, you threatened her, and you attempted in her bed and were institutionalized.
In the book, he visits Desi before he finds the stuff at the woodshed because he's actually suspicious of him. Desi lets him in. He meets his mom, who also hates Amy. She talks about how Amy is manipulative. It's also revealed that he did not try to kill himself, so that is another lie that Amy made up. There's also a friend in the book who, according to Amy, she started dressing like her, she started acting like her, and then went up to Amy's parents and said, I'm going to kill Amy and be your new daughter. But apparently, Nick, again, in the book, hauls her, and she says that that was all Amy's idea. She had just done it because Amy had said that it would be funny, and then next thing she knew, she was being kicked out of school. Tanner Bolt shows up at Nick's house, and they talk about how Amy really likes to punish people. They talk about the clues and how she has left incriminating evidence at each location of each of the clues. The underwear at the one place. Notably, in the book, the underwear that Amy leaves is not her size, which is supposed to show that he is cheating on her, which he is. They ask why it's called a little brown house, and it's because when he was a kid, he didn't like the thought that his dad never wanted to see him, so he pretended that his dad was a secret agent named Mr. Brown. At the third location, she had left all of the stuff that he had supposedly purchased on the credit cards. In the book, there's also another clue where he's supposed to go off to Hannibal, which is like a Mark Twain park type thing, and she had left her purse there so that they would find it. Nick's fingerprints were on her wallet, and supposedly it was supposed to look like he ditched it there, and they find that. Also, each of these places are places where he slept with Andy. And so he goes, okay, so what's at your dad's place? They go there, it's covered in like do not cross police tape. And Tanner's like, okay, so what they found is bad. In the book, Tanner tells Nick to break up with Andy, and it does not go well. So Tanner comes up with the idea of doing Shannon Schumer. I guess she's supposed to be like a Barbara Walters type.
There are people, a great number of people, who think that you two are spoiled brats.
And he's supposed to come clean about Andy. Amy is clearing out of the Ozarks, and Greta and this dude show up. They start to go through her stuff, and they find her money belt, and they take it, and they say that she should be careful because they're a lot nicer than some other people. Nick is about to do the interview with Sharon Schumer, and Tanner is training him by throwing gummy bears at him every time he looks uncomfortable or says the wrong thing. In the book, this is actually a scene with him and his wife, and it's a lot more fun because the wife is like speaking as some of the women. And again, like, he is supposed to have these relationships with women where they're supposed to tell him how he's supposed to act, and he's supposed to be like resentful of that. Amy makes a phone call and shows up at a casino where Neil Patrick Harris shows up. Sorry, Desi shows up. She tells Desi that Nick threatened her, he threatened to kill her, so she had to run away, and that she lost the baby. Also, there is a dude who asks her, like, oh, excuse me, ma'am, are you in something something?
Excuse me. You're one of the Nolan girls, right?
No, we're from Winnipeg.
This part's also in the book, and I do not understand the significance of it, but okay. In the book, she's like, Desi, like, I just really need some money. And he goes, I can't give you money so you can keep living like a poor. You should come live with me. Come to my lake house. We'll hide out there. I'll take care of you. You know, we can move to France or Spain if you want to. And she's like, no, I would just feel better, like, if you could just give me some money for now. And he's like, no, absolutely not. You're gonna, and it's like a push and pull, whereas here he's like, come to my lake house. And she's like, okay. Then we see Andy is on TV making a statement with Amy's parents, which is really weird. Like, in the book, she's there with her own parents. She says that she made a mistake and she feels bad for it. And Amy says, why is she dressed like a nun? Why doesn't she look like a big whore? In the book, Amy never would have said any of that out loud. She never wants to play her hand. She never criticizes people out loud. She would have said in her mind all that stuff, but she wouldn't have said it in front of Desi. And then Amy's parents say that they are officially withdrawing their support of Nick Dunn. So he has the interview with Chandra Jimenez.
I'm Chandra Jimenez, and I'm being turned into stone.
Sorry, Sharon Schumer, and apparently it went really well. Amy and Desi go to his lake house, which is actually like a mansion. She turns on the TV and watches reports about herself, and he promptly turns it off. He says that he'll get her some new clothes, not that he doesn't like bait shop chic. He also mentions that they have cameras, which is a fun addition because there weren't any cameras in the book. She says that she's really exhausted, and he takes the cue and is like, okay, I'm gonna leave. Book Desi never would have left as soon as she said she was tired. Book Desi is very imposing. He shows up unannounced because it's his house. He treats her like a possession. He also has a bunch of rooms in the house that he made just for her, even though he didn't know she was coming until today. He painted this room purple because she had loved purple when she was in high school. He has a solarium that has a bunch of tulips in it because it's her favorite flower. And it's like, okay, so this dude is obsessed with her. It's a little creepy. Neil Patrick Harris Desi just seems to be like a nice guy who really likes her. The next day, Desi comes into the house and Amy is nervous. Don't know why, but okay. He says that there's a gym and he buys her hair dye because, you know, you'll feel better once you look more like yourself. This also happened in the book. Book Desi is the kind of person who dates women so that he can fix them. You know, he sees them as projects. And in the movie, it kind of feels like a suggestion, whereas in the book, it's like an order. He also polices her food. Like, he's the one who's buying all the groceries, so he polices what she can eat. They watch Sharon Shupin together. So I just found out something super cool, and I want to geek out about it with you folks. I was looking up what I should use for the last clip, whether it's case in point or case and point. And I looked it up. And when there is a common phrase, but someone says it in a different way than it was originally intended, either because they're reinterpreting it or they misheard, it's called an eggcorn. So like when people say for all intensive purposes versus all intents and purposes and things like that. I don't personally care. I think that grammar Nazism is rooted in imperialism and racism and classism, so I could give a crap about that. But I do love the term eggcorn. Amazing. Delicious. He says that he was a bad husband, but being a bad person doesn't make him a murderer. He talks about how much he loves his wife, and Amy is glued to the screen. She is rapt at attention. Neil Patrick Harris, Desi also notices this. In the book, Desi says, oh, well, he knows how to play the game really well. He tells Sharon that he's been to the woodshed. You know, again, he's been flagellating himself over it, and this tells Amy that he knows and he still wants to be with her. He looks at the screen and says, Amy, please come home. And he covers his chin, which is meant to mean, I'm not bullshitting you. In the book, Nick knows that Amy is going to take the bait because he says that as soon as anyone says anything nice about her, she immediately believes it. And he says that he wants to make sure that she comes home so that he can kill his wife. Cops show up at Go's and they look at the shed and they find all the stuff, including the robot dog. They arrest Go. It looks like Boney is arresting Go because she's mad that she found out that Nick was cheating. It's a little weird. It's not really clear. In the book, all the stuff is covered in Nick's fingerprints because Amy has insomnia and Nick sleeps very deeply. So she had like taken his hands and put it all over the stuff, which again, it's like one more level of she is really methodical. Desi tells Amy not to believe what she's seeing on TV. He tells her not to give in to her feelings and not to make another mistake. And she falls into that sort of, oh my goodness, you're so right. I just need time, you know, stay here with me. And he says yes. In the book, she keeps pleading with him to give her money so that in case she has to leave, bada bada bada. But here it's just, they're just living together and it's nice. The chipmunk cheeks. Back at the police station, Nick says he's going to tell the truth. And Tanner says, I mean, I don't know if that's a good idea. They have the puppets. And it turns out that they found the puppet handle in his fireplace, but didn't know what it was. And now they know that it's probably the murder weapon. In the book, they find it along the Mississippi River. They show him the diary. They ask him questions about the entries from the diary. They're like, what's true and what's not? Did you kiss her with sugar on her lips? Yes. Did she try to buy a gun? He says, I don't know. In the book, he would have known that. In the book, they take a couple days to arrest him, which is how they justify him being able to get on bail because he hasn't shown himself to be a flight risk. It's back at Amy and Desi's. It's been 21 days. Amy's lost the weight and her hair's back to normal, or rather she took off all the shitty wigs, and Desi is about to go to work, and Amy bites his lip, makes him bleed, and then messes up his clothes and hair. When he leaves, it looks like he's like been in a tussle for the cameras. She pours cranberry juice on her crotch and ties one of her legs up with a ribbon and goes to the window and makes it look like she's trying to get out and crying. her like going in front of the cameras and like pretending to scream and cry. That was actually a fun addition. I did like that. Nick is let out on bond. There is a veritable mob waiting for him. Obviously, it's clear that people think he did it because the husband always does it. And Tanner says he has 2 PIs looking for Amy. That wasn't in the book, but it's a good idea. Back at Desi's place, Amy ties her arms up with twine and uses a bottle to make it look like something had happened inside her that hadn't happened. Presumably she had done the same thing with O'Hara. She seduces Desi. It's really weird to watch Neil Patrick Harris play a straight guy, especially in a sex scene. It's a little weird. It's a little awkward. But I've heard that sex scenes are really awkward in general to film, so it couldn't have been worse than any other sex scene. And while they're having sex, she slits his throat. In the book, they have sex and she doses him and then kills him in his sleep. This, I guess, it is the same director as Seven and Fight Club, so, you know, I can see him wanting to do something a little bit more gory and gruesome. Amy shows up to Nick's house covered in blood, and she stays covered in blood throughout the next many scenes. She goes up to him and he says, "You f***ing bitch," and then she faints. That was f***ing funny. I love that. I love that so much. That's amazing and very much like the book. She's in the hospital and the doctor says that she has wounds that are consistent with Boney is suddenly asking Nick for his advice, which is super weird. He says that it's a weird story. They're all asking her questions about what happened, and Boney keeps asking like reasonable questions like, what about the woodshed? Did you see all the stuff in the woodshed? What do you think about it? How about the handle? She's asking questions like about parts of the story that don't really make sense. Amy just turns it back around. She's like, I was kidnapped. She says that Desi kidnapped her, and that's what she wants to talk about, not about how they bungled the case. And it's very smart. There was a struggle. She had accidentally broken one of the handles, and she was holding it, and Desi whacked her with it and then put her in the car. In the book, what she also does is that bag of hair had long blonde hairs of hers, and she put some of them in Desi's trunk to make it look like he had kidnapped her and thrown her in the trunk. Boney asks about the allegations of abuse in the diary, and she says, listen, like, it did happen, but I love my husband. I want to go back home with my husband. In the book, there's also a scene where she describes having symptoms that are consistent with antifreeze poisoning, but this is not in this. I guess, again, they want to make it a little cleaner, but it's not in the movie version. Nick brings Amy home amidst a flurry of paparazzi. Again, still covered in blood. You couldn't have given her a sponge bath. So they get home and Amy says, oh, you were perfect. You know, you did everything right. And he was like, I was lying. And she goes, yeah, you lied for me. You know exactly what I want. And so he asks her what really happens. And she says, you might be wearing a wire. Let's go upstairs and take a shower. They start showering. Blood comes off of her and it's very like artistic and stuff. They should have given her a shower at the hospital. Nick calls Amy a murderer and she says that he went on TV and asked her to save his life, and she obliged. In the book, he's actually the one to acknowledge this. He's like, listen, thank you for saving my life, but like you killed a guy. He says that he's leaving, and she says that after all this, your wife was like sexually assaulted and lost the baby, and you're gonna leave her. The media is gonna eat him alive. And he says, as soon as the media is gone, I am leaving. And she goes, sleep on it. In the book, she reveals that when she wrote that entry about the antifreeze poisoning, she had actually poisoned herself with antifreeze, made herself throw up, and hid a jar of that vomit somewhere. If he left, she was going to bring it to the cops and say that he tried to kill her. He asks her if there ever was a baby, and she said there can be. And there's a look on his face that looks like he's both relieved and also kind of sad. This is also in the book. He goes and sleeps in the guest room, which is super interesting because it is like the flip of what we had seen her doing earlier when she was talking in the diary, even though that didn't happen. It's like a mirror of he is afraid of her now. So it's the first day that Amy's back. She is making crepes. Again, this is a reference to the book because in the book she was making crepes on the morning of their anniversary. Like she's the kind of person who makes big gestures. She's the kind of person who will love you in the way that she wants to love you. She'll do a lot of nice things without actually being kind. I know a couple people like this. They're having a press conference. They ask what they're going to do next, and Amy says that they're just going to try to live their lives.
Kiss my cheek.
At a coffee shop at the airport, Boney, Go, Tanner, and Nick are all talking about what's going on now. They talk about how they have a book deal. In the book, Amy calls her book amazing, which is funny. There is a Lifetime movie. He's franchising the bar, and Tanner says that he should thank Amy for setting up all that. So he should really be grateful. Okay. I don't know if this is supposed to be a commentary on what it is like to be a husband who has an abusive wife, because like Tanner is super flippant and does not take it seriously. And I feel like that kind of mirrors real life. Boney says that the case is basically done, so they can't really do anything. In the book, Boney is actually still investigating, and she's trying to use Nick and Go to try to set up Amy to find a way to like get her, you know? It's nighttime and Nick can't sleep, and Amy says she'll tuck him back in, and she says, "You don't have to be worried. You can sleep with me. Like I would never hurt you." Yeah, okay, that's what literally every single abuser says, but okay. 6 weeks home, they're doing another segment on Ellen Abbott. He's rehearsing what he's going to say, and he's going to say the truth. He's going to say that she did some horrible things and that he was complicit, but Amy calls him downstairs, and they start talking about what the segment is going to look like, and they're strategizing. She says she needs him to admit that he lied about the credit cards, that he hid all that stuff at Go's, and that he pushed her. She says she needs these 3 things to feel safe. Ellen Abbott shows up, and he's like, "You dragged my ass all over town." And she's like, "Well, I just go where the story goes. But hold on, here's an icebreaker." And she gives him a robot cat to go with the famous robot dog. He goes upstairs to find Amy, and she reveals that she's pregnant. In the book, Nick had found the vomit that she had been using to blackmail him. He'd found it in the freezer and had thrown it out and just like left the container on the table to let her know. And this was one of the reasons why she had gotten pregnant. She got pregnant because she called up the fertility clinic and used his sample. He's like, "But you threw it away." And she's like, "Yeah, I threw the notice away." In the book, he makes her pee on a stick and he watches her, and then he brings her to the doctor and watches the doctor test her, and it turns out, yes, that she is pregnant. She says that everyone's gonna hate him, and he says he doesn't care, and he's like, "You can't turn everyone against me." And she says, "Oh, your child will turn against you without my help." And then he actually assaults her. And she says, "I've killed for you. Who else can say that?" This line's also in the book, but it's actually Nick saying it to himself to try to work through his feelings on whether he actually wants to stay or not. And she's like, "You think you would be happy with some Midwestern girl? No way, baby."
You expect me to ignore my fans. They're life and death to me, baby.
He asks why she even wants to be with him.
All we did was resent each other and try to control each other, cause each other pain.
That's marriage.
No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. So they descend the staircase together in front of a bunch of gawping people, and it cuts to Margot crying on the floor of her kitchen because he's basically told her he's going to stay with her. And she accuses him of wanting to stay, and he doesn't say anything. But she says that she's going to support him no matter what. In the book, it is also revealed that he doesn't think that Amy is going to stop him from having a relationship with his sister because, as he puts it, we're both trying to be better people. They announce the pregnancy.
We're gonna be parents.
Oh, my goodness.
And it ends the same way it began. She's got her head on his lap, and he says, "What have you done to each other? What will we do?" But it looks a little more sinister this time. It's a different shot. She looks a little bit more creepy. In the book, the ending was a lot less ceremonious. Amy was telling the story about how her due date was the day after, and it was going to be their 6th anniversary, and she jokes about how she was going to get him iron handcuffs, but he doesn't need any more gifts from me, which is also referenced in the movie. She says that she asks him why he's been so good to her, because throughout the pregnancy, been doting on her hand and foot, and she's like, "Oh, why are you so good to me?" And the answer was supposed to be, "Because I love you." But the answer was, "I feel sorry for you." And she goes, "Why?" "Well, because every day you have to wake up and be you," she says in the book. I really wish he hadn't said that. I have nothing else to add. I just wanted the last word. I feel like I've earned that. And that was the end. So, overall thoughts. I loved the book. The movie was okay. The casting was off for me. In the book, Amy says that Nick looks like a rich boy villain, and I feel like Ben Affleck just doesn't fit that role. Like maybe Leo DiCaprio could have played it. A pretty white boy that doesn't treat women well and is not very likable. Something tells me that he would be good at that. Even Matt Damon, you know, back when he had like the floppy hair, probably because I think he did such a good job in The Talented Mr. Ripley. Or who I thought of immediately was James Spader in the 80s. yeah, he could have done a good job with this. Also, I really feel like Rosamund Pike, even though she did an amazing job in the second half, I feel like we needed someone to be a little more ditzy, a little bit more naive, a little less severe in the first half so that it would have been a higher contrast. Someone like Kristen Bell, I feel like could have done a really good job. I mean, maybe it's because I've seen I Care a Lot and Saltburn before I watched this, and I also knew what the twist was going to be, so I kind of was like, all right, I can see it. But Rosamund Pike's amazing. She's a queen. I didn't like the direction that they took her in the first half of the movie. I think overall this story is a cautionary tale about learning how to use other people's love languages and seeing a relationship not as who can win and who can lose. That's something that was also lost from the book. Like, Amy loved to win, and that wasn't really as explored as I would have liked. I also feel like Nick's character fell a little bit flat. Some of the nuances in his character were really gone. Like, his internal dialogue in the book was really complicated, and he was working through his feelings of resentment towards women that he knew was a remnant of his father. They didn't really talk about how his father had settled for their mom because he had been in love with somebody else, or he had been disillusioned with their life, and that's basically what he ended up doing. He ended up kind of in thinking that he could treat his child well, he basically is ending up putting himself in the same cycle of generational trauma, and I don't really feel like that came across as well. I feel like this movie was just like, look at this bitch, and there's a lot of nuance that was missing. Let me know if you liked this video. If you liked it, please give me a little like, subscribe. Tell me in the comments how you felt about this movie. Did you see the twist coming? Did you know about the twist? And maybe give me some suggestions on the next film that I should do. Have a lovely day. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week. Be queer, read books.